My name is Alex Dworjan. I'm an Ansible solution specialist. I'm going to be talking about Red Hat Smart Management and how that can integrate with Ansible to provide predictive analytics and remediation to help you manage across your entire hybrid cloud environment.
So why do I want to leverage predictive analytics? Whether we want to admit it or not, resources are limited, especially as you look into a multi-cloud environment, a global environment, and trying to manage that across a single infrastructure can be a challenge. Based on today's global world, there are a lot more security threats than existed 15, 20 years ago, so it's important to be ahead of the game and to ensure that vulnerabilities do not exist in your environment, because as we all know, any sort of downtime, whether it's related to a patching incident or unfortunately being hacked, costs significant money to the bottom line. So how does Red Hat play in this? Obviously, we have a huge ecosystem of tools that connect together, so we can leverage that capability to reduce potential of human error, because I can have Ansible playbooks that can really handle that mitigation for me, which leverages our expertise and knowledge base to really provide that out-of-the-box remediation for you. So how do our suite of technologies work together? So I can leverage smart management insights to see what's going on in my environment, whether it's on-premise, whether it's in the cloud, to really start getting toward that standard operating environment. Insights is what's going to go through and figure out whether I have advisories, vulnerabilities, or if I just want to see compliance standards and whether I'm actually in compliance or not. And then in the end, all of that can end up being pushed to the automation platform to have that centralized control for remediation. So how this all kind of ties together, I can have this, again, existing on-premise in the cloud. I can have each individual Red Hat Enterprise Linux host running that Insights client, which gets reported up to the Red Hat Cloud, where the Insights tool will actually run and do all those analytics for you, and then provide those recommendations on how to actually fix any potential issues that may arise. So what is Red Hat Insights? It's really designed to make the process of managing an environment much, much easier. So it can see potential risks that may come up, whether they are performance issues or whether they're actual vulnerabilities, so CVE that's been released, or it can be just letting you know that there are newer versions of packages that have been released and how you can actually go about correcting them. In many cases, there are automated playbooks that can help fix these issues. Other times, just recommended actions on how you can help reduce that performance issue or help just provide a more streamlined environment. And we've also added in ways to see just general costs. Are my resources optimized? How am I leveraging my subscriptions today? So you've got an exact idea of what's going on. So specifically for the Red Hat portion, obviously, most of this today will focus on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but I also do have that capability across OpenShift and the automation platform to have a full idea of what's going on with my operating systems, what's going on with my container environment, as well as what's going on with my automation tool set. So I can really start diving deeper into each of those individual pieces so I know, am I running in an optimized state? Am I getting the savings that I expect? And are there any issues that may be arising that I need to dive deeper into? So in this case, I'm going to focus on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux side of Insights. And as you can see, there are different aspects that go into that, both in the business side, as well as the operations and security standpoint. Each piece really provides that efficiency so I can do this really wherever my workloads lie. So the subscription aspect, obviously it's important to know really how am I using my subscriptions today? Do they exist in a physical environment? Are they virtualized or are they in a cloud provider? So I can see exactly how my consumption is being leveraged and aggregated really across my entire environment. A very nice, easy way to see exactly how the subscriptions I've purchased are being utilized or not utilized based on really how that is working inside your environment today. I can obviously export that data, so if it's easier for teams to look at, a CSV or JSON, I can leverage that capability as well. Resource optimization. So sometimes in my public cloud environment, maybe I'm not necessarily utilizing my resources in the most efficient way. Especially when you start looking at your cloud spend, it's important to make sure I'm not underutilizing my CPU or memory, so I can start looking at this across a 24-hour period and get a score. So I can really decide, is my system actually optimized? So it's a nice, easy way to see what systems are undersized, oversized, and then I can start going through that process of, well, I actually want to fix this so I'm not wasting cloud spend, and I can really start optimizing how my resources exist inside the cloud. Obviously, you can still leverage other tools or monitoring tools that you have in place, but this is another way to really streamline some of those processes so you have a single place to see exactly what's going on with your Red Hat Enterprise Linux systems in your public cloud. The next thing you start looking into is kind of that operational side of things. So I can start looking at what we call Advisor, which is just a way to start seeing, things that we recommend. A lot of this is looking at knowledge-based articles or things like that start giving you ideas of, where can I make things a little bit more efficient? Maybe there's some configurations that are slightly off that might be causing performance issues, or there are other aspects that can go into it. So once again, as I talked about earlier, I can have a playbook that I can put into Ansible that can run this remediation to get things back up in place. Other times there are just steps that I can take to monitor a configuration or keep up with things. So it just gives a good idea of exactly what's going on. And just some examples of this, I can look at just general performance rules. I can see server limit rules. I can see Postgres aspects. So it just allows you to do some fine tuning of different systems as well. So obviously this doesn't necessarily prevent a security risk, but there are some things that I can do just to overall improve my performance across various aspects of my environment. Obviously, sometimes the largest concern are addressing vulnerabilities. So obviously CVEs, I need to know what the risks are. Are they a high risk? Are they possibly easy to exploit? And then I want to try to remediate them as quickly as possible across the systems that are actually affected. While it's important to know that a CVE does exist, it's sometimes even more important to know, what systems that I have in my environment are actually affected. So this is going to look at, obviously, is it Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7? Is it Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8? Are these particular packages installed on these systems? And give you that capability, A, to have reports that I can provide to some of the stakeholders to see what exists in the environment. And then once again, I can say, this is a critical CVE. We need to patch this today. I once again can create an Ansible playbook to run across all of the hosts that may have that particular CVE in place. So as you normally see with the advisories that we put out, typically there is an Ansible playbook that is created as part of that. This ends up being provided directly through Insights, so I can have that capability to more easily remediate any CVEs that arise inside your environment. Compliance. So sometimes it's not just looking at vulnerabilities that may exist in your environment, but we also have a lot of compliance standards that we're responsible to maintain. And a lot of times it's not simply compliance exists on every single host. I may have certain servers that need to be PCI compliant. I may generally want to be NIST compliant. Some other servers may have to be HIPAA compliant. So I can select which servers that applies to and pick sometimes the specific rules that matter to us. There may not be, a full set of NIST rules that I actually want to apply to my systems. So you can pick and choose exactly how this works, which systems this applies to, have those scans run, have that data uploaded into Insights, see an overall passage or failure, and then see specifically which rules passed or failed. And then as you'd expect, as we talk through the other pieces, I can once again create an Ansible playbook to resolve a lot of those compliance issues. So again, trying to streamline a lot of these different processes to really make a lot of these pieces work well together. So I can get a very overall compliance health and then start deep diving into the specific aspects that you might want to resolve. Drift. This comes up a lot as you start looking into, how do I keep my systems the exact same way that they're provisioned a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year from now? So I can start defining really what my systems need to look like. I can create my own baseline and put that in there, or I can just compare hosts against each other and just get a good idea of not just the operating system level, but I can see the underlying hardware that's available to those systems. So it gets very easy to start seeing across the board how my systems are configured, and I can set it up where I can get notified if for some reason that baseline notices some drift on some of the systems that are reporting into Insights today. So it makes this process a lot easier to really see what's going on across your environment and hopefully get away from those one-off configurations or someone logging into a system, making changes, and then the overall operations team or infrastructure team not being aware of what changes were actually made. Policies. Sometimes this can be something as simple as, I don't want Wireshark installed on my systems, or I don't want a particular software, or even the exact number of cores that should be available on these systems. So I can define exactly a single policy or as many policies as I want for my particular systems. And then I can have it trigger a notification to me that says this particular system had this particular package installed to allow me to dive deeper into it. So again, just a nice, easy way to look for specifics that pop into a system without maybe looking at the drift aspect of it, but looking for specific things that maybe the security team refuses to have in your environment because it does present a security risk. So now I can be made aware of it as soon as it happens and correct that particular issue. One of the new things that we've rolled out is what we call Image Builder. So it's a way to start creating public cloud images for your environment. So especially as you look into being a hybrid cloud provider, maybe sometimes I have things that work best on AWS. Maybe there's some resources that I need to leverage in Azure, Google Cloud. So I can create that image, push that into the correct cloud provider based on what you're doing, and have that consistency across your environment. So I don't have to build directly from those cloud providers. You can create your own base image, set it up to your standards. So if that involves hardening or other pieces, or maybe I have different images for different use cases, I can set that up and then push that to my individual cloud provider accounts. So again, it's a way to streamline some of those processes and provide consistency as you expand into the different environments in the cloud. Patching. Obviously, patching is very critical to a lot of our day-to-day operations. Sometimes I just need to know, are there patches that I can apply to different systems? So obviously, we've already talked about CVEs and vulnerabilities, but sometimes there may also be specific packages that can be upgraded that I haven't done so for whatever reason. Maybe it's because there are certain rules that are internal. I've got, I'm leveraging satellite and I have certain content views and maybe I haven't updated them, or there are other reasons limiting the ability to upgrade and I just haven't. So this is a great way to not just see from the Red Hat side of things, but as you notice, this also leverages some third-party repos as well. So it's just a easy way to see high level what systems have what potential patches that can be applied to them. And once again, I can have a playbook to actually go through that upgrade process. It's going to leverage that usual patching mechanism. So it'll leverage Yum or DNF. It'll leverage the repos that are available to each individual system. So you may have to do some back-end work if I've got a particular content view for a system where I can't actually get that particular latest package. You may also have to go through that process. And if you're not aware, there are satellite modules that exist inside Ansible as well today. So it can even help streamline some of those processes to really streamline your patching. So talked a lot about insights, the cloud platform. How does this really start working together with Ansible? Talked a lot about the ability to create playbooks and have that remediation, but how does that work inside the automation platform and how can I streamline some of those pieces as well? So if you're not familiar with the automation platform, this is really that ability to provide automation across my entire environment. So whether it's Linux and Windows on-prem, Linux and Windows in the cloud, my networking devices, my security tools, I can provide the way for not just the domain experts to create content, but also the users to actually execute those capabilities that my Windows experts have created, my Linux experts have created. So even if it's something as simple as restarting a service in Windows, I can have that predefined for the end user so they don't need to know the administrator credentials. They don't need to know what my Azure passwords are. I can have all that built in and give exactly the access needed to my end users. So leveraging the role-based access controls, tying into Active Directory, Azure AD, IDM, whatever your typical authentication source is. So how does this work in terms of insights? Well, a lot of Ansible obviously derives from pulling from some sort of source control system for your playbooks. So typically that's a GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket type variety, but I can also pull directly from insights to get those remediation playbooks. So pulling directly as you create those inside the Cloud Console, I can have my remediation playbooks created, pull them directly into the automation platform, delegate them out based on specific user roles, and then run those playbooks through there with the usual audit control that you'd expect. So obviously all of those logs to maintain the automation platform can be pushed out to something like Splunk, and it's obviously it has all the credentials to log into my Red Hat Enterprise Linux host, maybe make changes to the underlying infrastructure for OpenShift. Maybe there are specific things that I need to do to cloud platforms. Ansible can connect to all of those different pieces with that usual control that I expect from the automation platform. So this is actually what my architecture looks like today. So obviously there are a lot of different pieces that I can leverage for automation. So it's not just leveraging Ansible to run those remediation scripts, but I also have the capability built in to do provisioning across my hybrid cloud environment, handle those post-deployment configurations, patching, orchestration, managing my networking devices as well, and then tie this into insights. Now I've got that proactive predictive analytics and automated remediation capability that I can tie in. So I don't always have to monitor every single system, know every single CVE that comes out, know exactly which systems that applies to. I can leverage that expertise of Red Hat to know what the CVE is and exactly how to remediate it, pull that into the automation platform, and be off and running. So it can streamline a lot of those challenges. And I obviously have a full list of every single host that lives, because in my case, I'm pulling that inventory directly from my hypervisor, whether it's Azure, whether it's VMware, whether it's Red Hat virtualization, whether it's AWS. So I have a current list of exactly what's going on, and then I can still leverage that to tie into other playbooks and content that I've created. So I'm going to jump into a demonstration to kind of talk through how this looks. I'll show those different pieces of the cloud platform, and I'll even show how that can be pulled into Ansible to actually run some of those remediation scripts. So I'm logged into the cloud platform and I'm able to see my overall Red Hat insights. So just starting off overall at the dashboard, I can see advisories, high-level vulnerabilities, recommendations, CVEs, resources, compliance, patching. So all those individual pieces that we talked about before, I can see at a nice high level. I can dive into my overall inventory so I can see actually what's registered or not to insights. So I can see if they're reporting or not. I can see my overall hosts. I can see the tags that are applied to them, operating systems, when they last reported, all of those individual pieces. So I'm going to start off by diving into Advisor. So as I talked about, these are recommendations around performance or things like that. So there are categories, risks, and risk of change. I can see which systems apply. I can see if there's an Ansible playbook available for them or if there's a manual change to update those. And I can obviously jump in, see the specifics around what that particular recommendation is, the risk of change, which systems are affected, and if there is an Ansible playbook, I can actually create a remediation for that directly from this cloud platform. So as I talked about with patching, I can see overall advisories that exist, so RHSAs, or I can just see the overall packages that exist and which ones may need to be updated for different systems. Or maybe I just want to see a holistic level of my systems and see, maybe which servers have some security advisories or bug fixes that just need to be applied. And I can jump in, patch those, and once again, create remediations, leveraging Ansible to make those updates. A lot of times the first place that people start off are CVEs. So whether it's looking specifically at the published date, the severity, base score, the number of systems exposed, I can dive in and see exactly what may be going on, see the published date and the specifics around it. Want to jump into the Red Hat database, I can as well. I can pick exactly which systems that I need to remediate based on what's going on. And in this case, I'm actually going to create that remediation. So I will create this for that new CVE. And for tracking purposes, I'm actually going to give it the name of the CVE so I can see what's going on. I can verify that the systems that I want to apply to, and sometimes it may require a reboot or not to actually remediate it. And I can even turn off auto reboot if I don't want that built into my remediation. So now it's available, ready to go. I can worry about this later, and I'll show about how I can remediate that inside the automation platform. Compliance is another aspect, as we talked about, HIPAA, PCI, NIST. So there are a lot of different policies that I can create. I've already got 2 created here. Very easy to create a new policy inside this platform. Pick the operating system, pick the exact policy type that matters to you. So in this case, I'll do CIS level 1. I can pick the profile. I can pick my compliance threshold. So maybe I need to be 90%. I can pick exactly which systems this applies to. So as I talked about, not every system may have every compliance profile. And then I can pick specifically which rules out of this set actually want to apply to my systems. So I can go through every single rule, filter it, figure out exactly what it is, disable it or enable it based on exactly what fits your environment. And then once that's done, I can run a scan on my systems and it will create a report for whatever that particular system is. Obviously, I'm not PCI compliant in my environment because I don't need to be, but I can jump in, download a report of exactly what's going on overall, or I can look at each individual system to see what's going on, to see that compliance status and exactly what rules aren't met or are met. And once again, as you can see, I've got Ansible playbooks for these. I can leverage Ansible to remediate some of these compliance issues. Drift, as I talked about, I can use just compare systems, especially if I want to maintain consistency. So I've already got a baseline set up for RHEL 7. So I'm actually going to leverage that to look at one of my RHEL 7 systems. My baseline's a little old. As you can see, it was 2 years old. So there are definitely some differences between BIOS versions and some of my packages, but I can see there is some consistency between the architecture, some of my underlying BIOS, the fact that it's a virtual system, all those pieces, and the fact that it is satellite managed, which for me is very important. I don't want this tied directly to the customer portal because I want to maintain all of the content views that I've created. So again, a very easy way to see both a architectural level as well as individual packages that are installed on my individual systems. I can provide that consistency down to that level as well. Resource optimization is specifically for cloud platforms, which I don't have anything available today, but I'll jump into the policies. So in this case, as I talked about before, my example was a Wireshark check. So just seeing if that particular package is installed, and I'll get an email, and I can even see a history of how often this has been triggered upon which host. So at this point, fortunately, I do not have any hosts that are running Wireshark today. I can see overall subscription health, where they're being run, whether it's on-premise, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's virtualized, whether it's physical. So I can see this across a pretty consistent environment. I can scale to daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly. I can see my current subscriptions, how many sockets, all those individual pieces. I can see all those. Obviously, if I had other subscriptions, I could look at that. But in this case, I can see, hey, this is actually running 3 guests on it. This one is running 5 guests. So you even see at the hypervisor level exactly what's going on and the public cloud level. I can dive into OpenShift subscriptions as well, but in this case, I want to dive into Image Builder. So as I talked about, I can use this to create new images across my cloud environments, dive into here, start with a particular base image, the registration, the actual configuration and systems, give it a name, pick which environment I want to push into, or I can even leverage a virtualization guest image or VMware. So it gives you a much easier way to create some base images for my teams to use. And then last but not least, obviously, as I build these different pieces, I want to run those remediations. So in this case, this is that remediation I created for that CVE earlier. I can see once again exactly what systems this applies to, the activity, has it actually been done or not? And I can see that capability. I can download that playbook if I want to look at exactly what that remediation will do to my end systems. I can also execute it through here if I have cloud connectors set up on my end systems, or I can leverage the automation platform to actually pull that in, run that, so I can delegate that out to the individual teams. In this case, I just have a project set up, connected insights with my credentials and everything already stored in. I'm going to sync that project so I can pull in that latest playbook. And then I'll actually go into my job templates. I basically have an insights remediation job template already created. And as you'll see, I actually have 3 playbooks available to me. So the 2 that were already successfully done and that new CVE playbook. It's got additional metadata attached to it. But now I could run this playbook, run that remediation, have that job history stored in the automation platform, have that exported out to Splunk or Elk, or create my own reports if I wanted to. And then I can still see the overall status back in here that the remediation has been run, the actions are completed, and I can see that, if I was run through here, or I can go into the automation platform to see the specific job history with the specific details of the host. So again, it just provides a much easier way to run some of these playbooks. And there may be times where I need to build it out a little bit more, where I need to work with my networking devices. So maybe I'm running a reboot of a critical production system. You can add in a workflow in the automation platform to remove those hosts from the load balancer, then run this remediation, and then put them back in. So you can start making this a little more complex to actually match how your environment looks today. So as your environments get more complex, it can be helpful to really start leveraging proactive analytics so I can see exactly the health of my environment and leverage automation to push those corrections out at scale. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how Insights, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Ansible can all work together. And hopefully you can start looking at how this can help you save a lot of time, provide consistency, and really leverage that capability across your entire hybrid cloud environment. Thank you.